Good evening, everyone. My name is Mita Menezes, and I am a second-year student in the Fordham Schools of Business and a fellow at the Center of Digital Transformation. Tonight, we have Bob Gach, Managing Director of the Global Capital Markets at Accenture. Bob, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Good evening.
Good evening. We'll dive in. I'd love to just talk to you about the digital transformation area in global financial services. If you could provide us with some cutting-edge trends and what students should look out for when launching their careers in financial markets.
Sure, it's my pleasure. And you know what, we don't have time to cover it tonight. I think the backdrop that everyone needs to think about as we look at these trends is that the business itself is undergoing such a transformation. And so, you know, if you're a student or a professional thinking about this industry, you have this convergence of just a complete change in all the business models as well as the technology, which of course is disruptive, but also very exciting. But on the technology side, you know, first and foremost are all the changes around the customer. For years, the financial industry was all about products. And now what we're seeing is customers want to be more in demand of their experience. And so the technology trends that play into that, of course, are the internet, multi-channel, mobility, and really a disruptive way as to how financial institutions own their customers and interact with them. So that's one area that I think is quite interesting. Certainly another area that I know the center is quite interested in is analytics. Analytics, of course, is well understood, but you know, there are some newer effects of what all of this means, I think, for financial institutions and both technology and business professionals. First, you're applying analytics now on data, including data that you do not own. So one of the real disruptive factors in technology today is that a lot of the data sits outside of the four walls of a financial institution. It may be in social media, could be on the consumer's laptop, it could be in other partners' data sets. So how do you deal with predictive analytics when you don't own all the data? And then the third one I'll mention just in the interest of time, and we can certainly cover more later, is cloud computing. Cloud computing, again, is not necessarily a new idea, but we're seeing the next evolution of the technology. Originally, cloud computing was seen as primarily an infrastructure play, you know, lowering the cost, virtualizing the cost and the technology. Now we're seeing cloud computing not only for infrastructure as a service, but we're seeing software as a service, process as a service. Think about it this way: can you use cloud computing to almost outsource, if you will, parts of your business process and do that in a more integral? So those are just a couple of examples, but there are so many more. And what I would just say for our discussion today is they both, all of these different initiatives or trends provide both a challenge as well as an opportunity. And really understanding the impact, not just on how to harness the technology, but how it changes your relationship with your customers, your suppliers, the business process, and the implications for your workforce. That's where I think the real interesting bits come into play.
Thank you. And with respect to analytics and cloud computing, how has Accenture capitalized on this? How are they driving top-line growth and within your own role as well?
Sure. Well, for us, I think as you know, many consulting or technology firms, you know, this is a very, very important area of investment for us. And you know, what I would say, you know, at a high level, there's probably three things to share. Number one, we don't see these as technologies that are standalone. So what we have tried to do in our business is to embed them into the things that we do. So for example, we don't go out and try to talk to our clients about an analytics project. What we talk about instead is there a project that they need to do with regard to customer retention, customer penetration, cross-selling, and we embed the analytics in there. Even in something like our business process outsourcing, where we're doing things like processing insurance claims, we found that analytics can allow us to capture additional information and provide insight back to the customer. So that's one aspect. The second aspect in terms of how we're using these technologies is, of course, to lower the cost of service of what we provide. So Accenture has our own software. Historically, some of that software we would install, you know, on-premise, and quite honestly, it can be, in certain cases, a very expensive endeavor. Great benefits, but you need a capital expense to get that done. So we're now using cloud technology ourselves, both to deliver some of that software and even to deliver some of those business processes I mentioned before. And then the third way, which you know maybe is quite interesting to think about as well, is what we're doing for our own business. So Accenture has 250,000 employees. We're in 50 countries. We have no headquarters. There is no single place that people look at as a home office. So these technologies for analytics and cloud can help us just to make our employees more effective and to deliver the services on the point of need, since we're a very mobile workforce ourselves.
Okay, terrific, thank you. And looking inward at a bit at the MBA program, you've had a phenomenal career at Accenture, 31 years, a veteran of Wall Street markets. You've managed across Asia, Europe, and North America, as well as across strategy development, IT planning, outsourcing, a multitude of roles and responsibilities.
Yes.
What advice do you have for MBA students who are either launching or advancing their career in the financial markets post-Fordham?
Sure.
How specifically should they be in tune with these trends of analytics and cloud computing? And also what type of skills should they hone in now while at school?
Right. Well, first of all, I think the program here I think is very relevant to the business world, and I think the first thing is for people to be very confident about the education that they're getting. Secondly, I think to recognize, as with any discipline, that it's really being very open and flexible moving forward. One of the things that's been, I think, the hallmark, not of my career per se, but what I've seen over the last 30 years, is that the pace of change continues to accelerate. In fact, in our company, what we talk about is the two things that are certain going forward are uncertainty and volatility. And I think the Fordham student is very well trained to think that way. So the first thing is be prepared to be flexible and think out of the box. And I think professionals graduating today with master's degrees and an understanding of business and technology need to be at the forefront of helping businesses think about how to reinvent themselves. And when I think about, some recent examples, and even the recent biography that came out on Steve Jobs, and he talks about his being in the intersection between technology and, in his case, the user experience of the consumer. I think the analogy here is to be obviously at the intersection of technology and business, which again, I think the program here is so good at. So I would encourage students to think about, as they go out into the career, or to the market and embark on their career, really think about how to use those disciplines, whether it be from their undergraduate side and general disciplines of marketing and accounting, or more of the masters in business, etc., about applying those core capabilities about business models, the issues that businesses think about, and then the impact of disruptive technologies. So small case in point, but perhaps will stimulate some further thought. When a new technology like mobile computing comes in, you can be very focused on the specifics about what are we going to do for this application or this part of the business. The real insight, and where I think a Fordham MBA or master's degree really starts to come into play, is what's the impact on the workforce? What's the impact on the end consumer? What does it do to the cost of doing certain businesses? How do you reframe the opportunity to get into new markets? If you're interested in international business, for example, there are over 300 million individuals without bank accounts in Asia Pacific. And even more so if you look at China, but just in the ASEAN area. So the opportunity there, when you start to think about things like mobile computing and cloud computing and what have you, it's not just a technology issue, it's a chance to have a huge impact on society, an economy, individuals' experience, and I think that type of expansive thinking and students being able to take their experiences and the new technologies, because let's face it, the technologies will change. When I came out of school, RPG-3 was all the rage. I don't think anybody would even know what that is anymore.
We'd have to ask you, what is that?
Right, well, it was a programming language, but my point is, technologies come and go. The benefit for someone with a master's degree or approaching technology from a business perspective is, of course, the harnessing of technology. And it's not just about, we can have cheaper applications or faster applications. It's really thinking about how, through the entire value chain, everything changes. The professional workforce of a financial institution, the value proposition to a customer, the disruptive effect of Walmart coming into the banking industry. And these types of things, first of all, I think are more interesting, can have a bigger benefit for society, and obviously provide for a much richer career than just saying, we've got Java 3.6 coming out, we can upgrade from 3.5.
Terrific, thank you. Looking back on your career, What has been the most defining experience for you? And also, what has been the most challenging and lessons learned?
Well, you look back over a certain amount of time, that's hard to pick, but certainly one of the things that I would have to center on would be my time in Asia Pacific. Having grown up here in the United States and then finding myself based in Japan, was, quite different on every level. And what I would say was defining about that was, again, the intersection of dealing with a different culture, being put in a situation where I had a management responsibility. So not only having to work in that culture, but having to manage, in this case, people in Japan, Korea, China, Australia. And one thing I think certainly most people recognize is Asia Pacific is not a single place. It's many different countries with different cultures and such. So when I think about the 6 years that I spent there running our financial services practice, that to me, if you will, was the defining moment of taking everything that I learned in my career about how to deal with change, to be very adaptive, how to communicate, how to bridge the divide between technology and business, and then to do it on a whole nother level. To have to do it in a situation where the way that people conduct business, the degree of openness versus indirectness, saving face, after hours, and how all those things blend together, and trying to then take what had been, success up until that point, and to repurpose it into a different culture and such. And now I'm back here for a couple of years in New York. I continue to stay in touch with my colleagues, but certainly everyone realizes that globalization is such an important factor in emerging markets. And I would say that was a defining period in my career that continues to be very important to my success today.
Terrific, thank you. And along those lines, you've had extensive experience in strategy development. I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding how you've launched your outsourcing business within Asia, as well as helping Accenture enter the China market. What advice do you have for our MBA students and future managers in identifying strategic growth opportunities?
Yes. Well, it's a very good question, and and I think this is why you've selected this. It's not about the outsourcing business per se, but it's a great case example.
Sure.
And I think the first thing, especially in an emerging market, is to recognize that you do have to put into the context of the local market. So, simple example, in the United States, when we were doing outsourcing, a lot of it was about labor arbitrage, lower cost of service. If you go into China, that's not of interest because it's already, you have the ability to leverage a lower cost workforce. So you're not going to get the labor arbitrage opportunity. So when we looked at launching our outsourcing business in Asia, it really was a different story in each country. In some cases, it was around labor arbitrage in Australia. That was a part of it. In other cases, it was other reasons. But the common thread through all of it, and I think why it resonated in that market, was it was the ability to bring industry capability and business insight into the market in an efficient way. So for example, if you look today in what's going on in China in the business and technology market, a lot of what's happening is a technology and business transfer. And so when we were talking to clients there, they felt that some of this was a way to insource, if you will, business knowledge, and to do it in a way that otherwise would have taken a very long time to do. So the point I guess I want to make is the first thing is understanding that, and you can say this for really any product or service, if you're going to internationalize it, it may still be very attractive, but you may need to position it, sell it, explain it, or even price it differently. And I think there's many examples in the product world of consumer goods and industrial goods where people have been successful or not if they miss that mark. And then the second thing related to this, which is very, very important in the emerging markets, and especially in Asia, is I can't overemphasize the importance of relationships. One of the things that I was told when I first came there, my original posting was supposed to be for 3 years. And my colleagues told me, don't tell anyone that you're going to be here for 3 years. And I said, why? They said, because they won't take you seriously. That's too short.
Yeah.
You just have to tell them you're here. And again, it wasn't about misleading someone, but it was the mindset of, if you start to project that you have a short-term view as defined by that culture, that's going to not be very helpful. That's going to get in the way. So a lot of selling these types of services and bringing these new services in is recognizing that you first need to build a relationship. So the way we started was first we dealt with the multinationals, where we already had the experience. Dealing with, global insurance companies or banks that were headquartered in the United States or Europe but had major operations in Asia. The benefit there was we had the relationships, and then secondly, when we went to, let's call them the national or domestic players, we could also point to something in the local market and give them more comfort. So-and-so, you can go down the block and get a reference, and you can touch it and you can feel it. And that was very important as well.
Terrific. Thank you.
Sure.
And you've shared quite a few qualities in terms of navigating through the markets and also with dealing with these disruptive technologies. I'm curious, shifting over to the leadership component, as you've managed across, what are some of the key leadership qualities that you look for, both in terms of dealing with other managers and directors and for our MBA students going forward?
Yeah. Well, I do think this is the most important area we can talk about. And, going back to your earlier question about, defining moments and such, I could have gone on and talked about other defining moments.
Please do.
No.
Clearly you've had many.
But it is about, leadership. In fact,
Yes.
One of the things we talk about all the time in my company is there's a difference between managing and leading. And of course, there's been much written and taught about that. But the things that I look for are, first and foremost, what's sometimes referred to as emotional intelligence, the ability to read people, whatever. I can't tell you how many times, unfortunately, throughout my career, I've been in situations where people are just oblivious to what's going on around them. Whether it be, in a social situation, a presentation, whatever it might be. So really being able to read people and bond. And, in the business world, especially with more experienced people, superficiality comes to the fore very quickly. And so that's important, and especially in some of the markets we talked about. So really being able to read people, high emotional intelligence, being able to connect with people, and all different levels of people. I think the most successful people at Accenture or anywhere in the business world come across similar and are able to, adjudicate their interactions, whether or not it's with a new recruit, a middle manager, or a CEO, and being very comfortable and confident about that. Secondly is clearly the ability to communicate. And of course, as we all know, communication starts with listening, which you're doing a great job of. Sorry I'm talking so much. But being able to really get your point across. And again, I think, the program here at Fordham and the type of education you get is so important because what's limited many people who come out of a technology background is despite how bright they might be or how innovative they are, in the business world, if those ideas, can't get out there, you have a challenge. And I see this all the time. I go into banks and I meet their chief architects who are brilliant people, but the reason that they're chief architects and they haven't been able to get into management or leading business is because, well, they can't hold a conversation or they can't convey their messages. I was at a bank the other day and they were telling me that their architect was a great guy, but he was having no impact because he was afraid to get out of his office and push these changes. Yeah. And business is so much about, making change happen, which is all about listening to people, explaining the point of view, getting people to move in a certain direction, again, all things that I think, the Fordham program and the Fordham faculty do such a good job of trying to push on. And then, the last thing which we've touched upon a little bit in our discussion tonight as well is continuous learning, always reinventing yourself. And I think that's just so important because, again, not just technology, but business in general, the pace is just breathtaking. It's the thing that's most exciting. But anyone that feels that they can get to a certain level, whatever that might be, and that now is the time just to coast, it's not going to happen. We talk about it all the time, maintaining relevancy for your career. And what I would tell you, whether or not you wind up in a company for a long time as I have, or for a short time, the most important thing is maintaining your relevancy in the marketplace. And if you do that, you'll have a good career in your company, but more importantly, if you decide to leave the company, you'll have many more options if you maintain that relevancy in the marketplace.
Terrific, Bob. Thank you so much again
My pleasure.
for coming back to Fordham.
Yes.
That's Bob Gach, Managing Director of the Global Capital Markets Group at Accenture and the Center for Digital Transformation Scholar in Residence. Thank you.
Thank you.